Today we are visiting Lakeside Cemetery, located at 2402 Pangborn Road, and that would be Lynden, Washington. So you can Google that and take a look at that. We will go over to the entrance. The entrance is a little gate over to the northern side. And we'll just go in here and begin our tour. Lakeside Cemetery first began when John C. Ehlers died of rheumatic heart disease, and that was in 1899. And when Henry C. Ehlers donated this piece of property to the Lakeside Cemetery Association. So we'll just go over here and look at the first headstone that was here. So this is the headstone of John C. Ehlers. He was born on April 7th, 1889, and he died June 2nd, 1899. A little over 10 years old. Like I said, he died of rheumatic heart disease, and that was initially started because of strep throat. So they didn't have the drugs and stuff to combat that, and it was a tragedy. What's interesting about Lakeside, as opposed to Perry Cemetery and St. Anne Cemetery, that this was a prime orchard ground. So this is a little unusual in the fact that it is good agricultural ground, whereas the other cemeteries were put on hillsides and along the railroad, and didn't use up any usable farm ground. Continuing our tour, let's go over to the oldest. The person who lived the longest is buried at Lakeside Cemetery. And this would be a stone house. And let's see if we can get the right one. This was Emma J. Stonehouse. And then she was born in 1866 and died in 1971. A little over 105 years old. As we continue our tour, another interesting fact about Emma Stonehouse is she died on a Monday. As we continue our tour, let's just continue over and just walk through the cemetery here, and just walk to a family plot. One of them, now here is one of the Kirkman plot. This is interesting in the fact that I had to put in temporary markers for 5 of them. I had 4 babies that died, and they had 10 children totally. 6 lived and 4 died, and that was back in the days where medical treatment was pretty poor, let's say. And that was from Robert A. and Maud L. So continuing on, let's go over here. This is an interesting plot here. This is David Leroy Friend. He was in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. He died in a horrible farm accident. And farm is not a safe place. Accidents are caused. They just don't happen. Horrible farm accident. It's dangerous on the farm. Continuing on, just over here we come to a grave that's always seemed marked. This is Sonia M. Griffin. She died of CMT, Charcot-Marie-Tooth syndrome. It's a genetic disorder, and it's caused by, it's a dominant gene passed through the mother. The father can have it too, but it's mainly passed through the mother's genes. And the sad part about this is that she has 3 girls. Continuing on, there's a little tour here. We come upon an unmarked grave here that I've marked with a temporary marker. A baby girl Connell. What's interesting about this, the baby died and they buried her here. 10 days later, the mother died, and they buried her in a plot some distance from here. Why that happened, I don't know for sure, but there's a good possibility. Obviously, they didn't think the mother was going to die, and also it could have been that it was during the winter, because she died in January, that it could have been so much snow in the cemetery they could only come to this point because it's right near the entrance, it's higher, and they were able to bury her here. Let's just walk down the main road here, and we see some ester greens. There's 2 ester green plots, one to the by the fence along Pangborn, one here. I won't go into too much detail here. We come to the Gillis plot. There's Beaton Gillis. And, this is an interesting one. Sarah Robinson. Another person that has lived over 100 years at Lakeside Cemetery. And another thing that's interesting, Sarah Robertson lived near just across from the Van Buren store. They came from Prince Edward Island, and actually there's quite a few people that came from Prince Edward Island that have lived a long time. So be interesting to do a little research on that. Another interesting thing here, she also died on a Monday. Here we come to 2 big headstones. Here's Arthur Kirkman. This is quite a headstone. Let's just back up here so you can get the view of it. This is like an Easter Island headstone. And Arthur Kirkman, and Agnes Kirkman was his wife. They lived in the near where the Van Buren store. In fact, I think he owned the property where the Van Buren store was back in the early 1900s. In fact, it was in 1883, I believe he bought it from William Perry, 60 acres there where the Van Buren store was, and where it went over to where I can remember O.A. Kirkman living there. Okay, over here is Tilton. Another big family headstone. What's interesting here is the Tiltons originally were buried, some of these were buried at Perry Cemetery, and then they were reinterred here. There's also something else here that I want to talk about. Swanson. The 2 oldest men in the cemetery did not live to be 100. They lived to be 98. And Oscar E. was born in 1887, and he died in 1986. And he was married to Stella. And this couple was married for over, I believe, 70 years. So they're the ones, not only is he the 2nd oldest man, but they were married the longest of all the people that I know that are buried at Lakeside Cemetery. What's interesting here, his son, Donald, was 98 years, 11 months. And so he outlived his father by 11 months. The oldest men in the cemetery are 98 years, while there's about 4 or 5 women that have lived longer than 100 years. And what's interesting about that is they died on a Monday. So let's just go over this. There's the again the Arthur Kirkman, and here's O.A. Kirkman, Oliver Alfred Kirkman's plot, and Forrest Kirkman and Gladys Wilcox. You can find some of these pictures of them on the internet where they attended the Clearbrook School. So let's move over here and let's take a look at the map. This was a senior project by myself, I'm Rod Perry, and Tom Marion, working on this this map. It was made in Excel, and it's got Excel worked really well for cemetery because it's basically little plots, and Excel is has a lot of little plots to it. But anyway, what we did, we made it in Excel and then saved it as a PDF, and I emailed it to Applied Digital Imaging, and they put it on this Sintra material, and it's made to print on. Now it's been up here, well, it says here there's a little secret spot on the 23rd of March 2010. So this has been a little over 2 years now, and the colors are holding up really well. We made the map so anyone that was buried at that time is put in it, or their name is put on it, but all the plots are marked. So then, in conjunction with that, we have a directory, and the directory shows the plot and lot numbers. So that's all we'll have to update. The map is pretty much permanent, and the directory is then updated hopefully yearly. So that's all we have to do on that. And so let's say we want to find somebody, just as an example. Let's take Gibbs. So here's Gibbs. There's George Gibbs. So it says 41-2. So we come to the map, we got to find plot 41. That's here, 41 and 2. So there's George Gibbs. So right here it shows where we are on the map. And then, so if we go south, you got to have your spatial ability good here, because the map is oriented in a different direction, but spatially, if you look at it, you're here, and here's the here's the Pangborn Road, so you can get your bearings. Then George Gibbs is in 41-2. So if we head a little south to the next section, we can find George Gibbs. If we're real good, we would have paid attention to where here's Gibbs and here's George W. What's interesting about this, hopefully my shadow doesn't affect it, is George W. Gibbs was the first official weather observer at the Clearbrook Station. And that's when it was at Clearbrook, the town of Clearbrook. And that began in March of 1903. And he kept it until about, well, I don't know what years he kept it. There were a couple observers there, I believe. But in 1916, then it was moved to its present location on the Perry Farm. So, little history there. Moving on, let's go over to just keep walking down and take a look at the walk down over here, and let's get a view of you see the trees in the foreground there. The trees in the foreground is actually Pangborn Lake. Pangborn Lake used to be a lot bigger than this, and in the late 40s, I believe around 1948, they shot the last part of, I want to call it Cummings Creek, and with dynamite, and released the water to lower the lake. Well, when they did that, it created a huge flood down, because the water then goes down Cummings Creek and enters Johnson Creek, and then they created this flood that went all the way down to Sumas. And I was told by Bill Connell that it killed the chickens in his chicken house, and that's down there at Sumas on Flanagan Road. In conjunction with that, I want to go to a grave over here, and it's in the Anderson lot. This is Elmer's and Clara's. I gotta find, there was an L one. That's Esther, Ernie. There's an L one here. And what I want to point out here, here's L one. He died on, I believe, it was on a Monday, and I believe it was May 5th, 1945. And this was kind of a tragedy. He died right out in the lake here, and the boat was had holes in it. They went out with a boat. There were 3 of them, and this was after school, and there was an accident out there, and he died in the lake. So I talked to one person, Lakeside Cemetery, and they kind of laughed, where's the lake? Well, there was a lake, and it was a lot bigger than what we see now. Continuing on, we can't get everybody. A lot of things happen to different people that have been in the cemetery. One of them, let's over here, is, and I had a hard time reading this stone, is no, it's not that one. There's a stone here that no, none of these. Oh, here it is. It's not Memorial Day, but here we have a stone. And it says, Gus Johnson's Friends, St. Paul and Tacoma Camp 7, 1882, 1948. He was working in one of the camps, railroad camps, and he died there from probably some accident, or I assume an accident. There were a lot of accidents in the logging camps, and his friends got together and got him a stone here. So a wonderful memorial. Let's just continue on. This is Brandon James Connell, young man. Playing Russian roulette. He was killed by his self-inflicted wound. Caution. Sign says there, caution. And don't be playing around with guns. So we have a variety of things. We have guns, we have accidents, farm accidents, we have drownings, we have, most of them are natural causes that are buried here. So we come off to a new section, so they bought original cemetery. We're standing at the edge of the western edge of the cemetery, and this was the old cemetery was laid out in plot lots, or actually lot plots, and each lot had 12 plots to them with a walkway between. Then they bought a newer part of the cemetery, and actually they just started burying people here, and they found out as they went along, wow, this is a mess. And so they hired an engineering firm, and Northwest Survey actually did it, and they surveyed it and marked it all out. So it's been well surveyed, but there was a problem. They couldn't do anything with the old part, and so they just had to leave it, and then it's been worked in. So if you looked at the map closely, you'll see that there's the old part, which it was laid out in a lot plot configuration, and then this newer part that was surveyed, that was laid out in a surveyed. So it's all done. When they surveyed, they found out the old cemetery was skewed probably 10-15 feet to the northwest. So it's not exact either, but at least it's got some organization to it. And leaving this part with plots that are laid out, and they do work, but they weren't exactly surveyed.